welcome back to another episode of Tech Pro Unicorn Podcast. I am your host, Michael Grayson. Today, we are going to talk about building companies through their people. I'm super excited about this. Most of you know that it's just such a passion of mine to invest in your people. We're also going to talk about piano bars, which I think is also cool, and how piano bars are related to people. My guest today, Gregory Offner, has just, if you want to follow along at home, I challenge everyone to just kind of pause a moment and go to Gregory Offner, OFFNER.com, and watch this video that's on his page. We were joking before we started the show about how I just got pumped up by watching that. It's truly inspirational, and it makes you pause and rethink kind of conventional wisdom. So Gregory is one of the most in-demand experts on the topic of professional performance, navigating disruption. His clients include Fortune 100 companies. He's often asked to keynote at conferences where industry leaders and executives turn to him for new perspectives on how to elevate performance, eliminate disengagement, and make work suck less. So, Gregory, thanks for taking the time, man, and joining us here on the podcast.
I am pleasure. Goodness gracious. I'm happy to be here. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on the show, Mike.
I love it. Your background is just so cool, right? From a guy who was your story. When I read your story, I was like, wow. Talk about like just this journey, right? I recently went to Howling at the Moon in San Antonio and had this phenomenal piano bar experience. And I was like, how do these two dudes on stage make me hand them my money? Because I was just like, I was Venmoing shit. I was like hundreds of dollars later going, what am I doing? So you come from this cool entertainment background and performance background, and then you parlayed that into how do I help Fortune 100 companies? Like your story is really cool. Maybe you could share just a little bit about your story before we jump into the meat of the topics.
Sure. So I got out of university with a cobbled together degree of psychology, philosophy, and music. And naturally, there weren't many job offers waiting for that particular degree field. So I fell into the world of sales. And if I'm honest, it's because I didn't have the courage or confidence to pursue my true passion, which was performance. I did that on the side from time to time whenever it was easy, but I was operating under this belief that if I were meant to be a musician, music would find me, which of course is a really nice excuse for not putting yourself out there and be willing to be rejected. So instead, I put myself out there and was willing to be rejected as a salesperson for an organization that was a wonderful organization, but I was not particularly passionate about what I was doing. However, I turned out to be pretty good at it. And so I got promoted up the ranks, as I'm sure some of your listeners can identify, falling into a career they're not particularly passionate about, but then getting promoted up the ranks, and found myself several years down the road, several positions up the ladder going, well, I guess this is my life. I guess I'm kind of stuck here. At night, however, I had taken a few steps further towards my musical performance career. And at this point now, I'm working at solo and dueling piano bars on a very regular basis. And in fact, I'm starting to perform all over the country. And to date, I've performed on 5 continents. I've played all over the world. So I feel very lucky that although I haven't made a lot of money as a professional musician, I have made a lot of connections and a lot of amazing memories. So now the year is 2015, as the story goes. And I have my day job and I have my sort of air quotes night job as a musician, or my other job. Now the kids call it a side hustle, a side hustle as a musician. And things are going pretty okay. The money's great during the day and the experience is great on the side hustle. And around about July of 2015, I was wrapping up a theater show, which for me was a new experience. Another performer and I had this theater for a multiple night run, and we did sort of an Elton John, Billy Joel style show where, we throw the pianos together and it's a curated set list. It's not like the dueling,
Sure.
The dueling set list, that I'd be used to in the evening. And throughout the course of that performance, my voice had been getting a little bit raspier, and then a little bit raspier, and then some notes were a little bit out of reach for me. And by the time we had wrapped our final show, I sounded like Joe Cocker after he smoked a pack of cigarettes and drank a bottle of tequila. I mean, it was rough and raspy. And I went to my next performance, started my warm-up song, and couldn't hit a note, which as a musician scared the bejesus out of me, because that's what I'm supposed to be really good at, is hitting notes.
Mm-hmm.
But in the back of my mind, I couldn't help thinking, if this is a vocal issue, it's going to impact your paycheck during the day also. Several visits to several different doctors later, we learned that my voice had been deteriorating over a period of time. They weren't sure how long, but over an extended period of time. And because I hadn't taken action on it, it now was at the point where it was critical failure. If I did nothing, they said, within 2 weeks to 2 months, my vocal cords would become permanently paralyzed and I'd lose the ability to speak forever. If I did something, if I did what they were recommending, my day job would be jarred beyond recognition and I would have probably sung my last song professionally. So just to reframe that for the audience, best case scenario, they can get me talking again, but I've probably sung my last song. Worst case scenario, I never speak again. And I just, to give this more reference, if you're not familiar with what's been going on with Val Kilmer, I just saw the new Top Gun last night, and I was wondering what they were going to do with his role, because he's been going through some medical challenges that have basically robbed him of his ability to speak. And I don't want to spoil it for anybody else, but Val and I dealt with two different things, but could have had two similar outcomes had I done nothing. So I chose surgery, and it completely upended my day career, and in fact made it ultimately untenable for me to stay in sales. I tried over a period of a few years, and as this procedure moved forward, but it wasn't working. And I've never been back to a dueling piano bar as a performer. But midway through this surgery process, which to date I've had 13 surgeries to repair and rebuild my vocal cords, 2 surgeries to rebuild a valve in my stomach. So as we learned that acid reflux, nighttime acid reflux, was a real culprit in the quick degradation of the vocal cords. And in that process of surgery, then recovery, then surgery, then recovery, I became very depressed because I wasn't succeeding at my day job and I wasn't able to participate in what I loved in music. And I thought, there's probably no point in me being on the planet anymore. And I had some very real thoughts about taking action to make that thought a reality. And I knew that was a problem, because remember, I've got enough of a background in psychology to know when it's just a fleeting thought versus a rumination, so to speak. And so I started to take action, and I made some changes. And as I made those changes in my life, I realized that I was miserable and that money was not going to fix that misery. And in fact, there's a study by a Nobel-winning economist named Dan Kahneman where they objectively identified the amount of money. I want to say the study came out in some time, 2015, 16, actually, funny enough. At that point in time, they had identified that $75,000 US was peak objective happiness. That even if you made $1 million, you were only 10% happier objectively than somebody who made $75,000 a year. It's a marginal difference, not a material difference in happiness. And so I said, I don't care if I never make what I'm making now ever again. I need to do something that I'm passionate about, because at some point in our lives, we're all going to confront the fact that we've done something for the last time. We may not know it while we're doing it, but someday every one of our listeners here will do something for the last time. It could be hugging a loved one. It could be playing a sport or engaging in an activity that we love. It could be seeing our favorite artist or band. I didn't want to leave this earth with the ideas and the music and the passion that I had for creating change and for helping other people in their life. I didn't want to leave this earth with all that still inside me. And I thought, if I don't take action now, I'm never going to. So I made a radical change. I decided to leave the comfort of my W-2 job and plant my flag, as my dad would say, in the world of keynote speaking. And I fuse my business background with my background in music because I'm now healthy enough to sing a little bit. I can't do the 3 and 4 hour gigs that you just enjoyed a couple days ago at a Howl at the Moon, so to speak. But I can sing for an hour, 90 minutes or so. So I fuse those two passions together, and man, even with the pandemic, I am having the time of my life.
I love it. I when I read your story, I just like it caused me to pause. Right, I was like, here's a guy just faced with kind of unimaginable challenges. That what I love is sure you had a down point, right, but then you really pivoted, which sometimes is hard, and you came up with something so cool. Like I cyber stalk all my guests when I was cyber stalking you. I was like, virtual piano bar. Like, how cool is that, right? Like, especially during the pandemic, we were all like, what do we do? What do we do for entertainment, right? And you had like bands live streaming. We go to live music almost either every Friday or Saturday night up at a outdoor mall. Well, not now because it's 115 in Arizona, but typically we go outside and we just sit for a couple hours and we listen to bands on stage. These are up and coming local bands and stuff. And we just love live music. We love piano bars. And then when I saw that, I was like, virtual piano bar. I'm like, that's brilliant, right? Like, how does you, I guess, participate in all that and get that same experience? So you created a virtual piano bar. Talk to me a little bit about what that is, because that, to me, that just is an act of brilliance.
I laughed earlier because that's like a pivot on a pivot. And let me explain for the audience what I mean by that. So I made this decision to leave the W-2 world and start keynote speaking in June of 2019. Now, if anybody's doing the math real quick, that's about 7 or 8 months before the whole world shut down. So I made the decision to put my financial security in the future of live events 7 or 8 months before every live event on the planet shut down. And, for the first couple months, after I left my job and started, advertising and marketing myself as a keynote speaker, it was going really well. I mean, we were trending like I was actually going to create more income for myself in the first year of speaking than I had in my best year in the W-2 world. And then in mid-February, we heard some news. We heard that my wife was pregnant.
Oh, that's awesome.
Don't worry, it was mine. It's not like it was a surprise to both of us. Well, it was something we were trying for. But imagine now I've put my family's financial future in this very shaky place. And then a month later, the whole world goes into a shaky place. So I had pivoted and then I thought, oh, dear Lord, I've got to pivot again. What can I do? So truth be told, I spent the first 2 months, so March into probably like May or June of 2020, watching Netflix, crying in my beer, lots of beer. Because Kim wasn't drinking any, so I had all the beer, and just having a pity party, and that's okay. It's okay to not be happy with a situation or a circumstance we find ourselves in. There is such a thing as toxic positivity, and it's not good for us. But there does come a point in time where you have to look at yourself or look at your situation objectively and say, okay, this is what it is. What are we going to do? So I literally took stock of the physical resources I had in my home, because at that point in time, it was getting harder and harder to get things from Amazon. I was lucky being a professional musician. I had lots of pro audio gear. I had lots of stuff that we needed to connect and plug into the internet and do the stuff that people pay me to do. But my clients were telling me, hey, we're really not looking for content right now. We're just trying to keep our heads above water. It seems like our disaster management plan is getting rewritten every hour. So what we need is something to help our people de-stress, smile a bit, and just have some fun. And Greg, we got to tell you, we're already done with and sick of and tired of the bring your dog to the Zoom call, the wear your college sweater to the Zoom call. Like, we need something new. And so I looked at all the pro audio gear I had. I looked at the keyboards. I looked at the interface or the computer. And I said, I don't know how this is going to work, but I'm willing to try it if you are. What if we did a virtual piano bar? And everybody's eyes lit up and said, okay, help us understand what that is. And I said, I don't know what it is, but let's find out together. So I did a couple of these events initially for free, and we worked the kinks out. And so we would use Zoom, and we had to figure out how to get rid of the echo and the audio delay and the fuzziness, and get through all of the different, I'm not a technical guy, so all the different things within Zoom that were messing up the audio. And then finally, Zoom made some tweaks that allowed us to really perfect it. And we started to deliver these 90-minute, these 60-minute, these 30-minute experiences where people would log on and in real time from around the world be able to make requests, experience a piano bar from their couch with their kids. You know, we made these shows purposefully family friendly so that it wasn't just for adult employees of the company that was hiring us. It was, you know, bring your kid on. We'll play some Aladdin. We'll play some Encanto. You know, we'll play whatever it takes to get people smiling and de-stressing and having fun. And I was blown away by the demand for this. The largest event we did was an international conference where we had 6,000 people attending. We used a different platform. Obviously, Zoom doesn't hold them in. And we even had some people who said, can you do this for our family? Like, we want to invite our friends. They saw it, their company paid for it, and they said, we want to do something private for our friends. So I did 2 virtual New Year's Eve parties over the last 2 years. I mean, it boggled my mind how a pivot on a pivot could turn into so much fun and allow me to do something that I love. And I'm glad that you saw it and loved it.
You know, we did the same thing as a company, right? We pride ourselves on our culture and our people, and the pandemic threw us into how do we serve these people, right? Like, how do we help them where they are? You know, we enjoyed the benefit of not losing anybody in the pandemic, right? And not laying anyone off or having that kind of financial difficulty with our employees. But, and this is a great pivot to the next aspect. We were like, how do we serve our people, right? How do we help them and offer them things? And we did things like live Trivial Pursuit. We have a guy who does Trivial Pursuit in a bar a couple nights a week, and he's like, I can do it virtually, right? It's very similar to the pivot that you made. He's like, I can bring that and we'll do it virtually, and I don't know what it looks like, but we're going to figure it out. And we did it for a couple times, and everybody loved it, and they brought their friends and their family. We had a guy who was in a band, and he had his band play virtually, and there was just all these Friday afternoon events where we all came together. And to your point, it was about investing in our people and getting everyone to just forget the world for just a moment and have a smile, right? And know that we're all in it to win it together, and we're all going to get through this, and we're going to have our sense of community, which really kind of, you pivoted then. Again, if you guys aren't following along at home or after the podcast, don't stop the podcast to go watch the video, but go watch the video, right? Because you powerfully talk about the business side of, right? Businesses are all about revenue, and we got to grow, and we got to, have great performance and such. And they're all talking about the financial factors of the business. And what they forget, right? And I think some key leaders, you can point to throughout history, have said our business succeeds when our people succeed, right? And that video just caused me to pause and go, it's the people, right? So talk to me a little bit about the pivot that you then made, or maybe you made the pivot simultaneously. You've pivoted a couple times, but your speaking is about how companies can invest in their people and raise their people up.
Yeah. And going into the pandemic, that wasn't the case. Going into the pandemic, I spoke about disruption, because losing one's voice when someone is a professional singer and a salesperson is probably the most disruptive thing you can think of. It's like a marathon runner losing their legs, but much harder, I think, for people to visualize, because you don't see your vocal cords. You don't even think about losing unless you're watching Ariel and the Little Mermaid, you don't think about someone losing their voice. So after speaking with my clients, the general consensus was that everybody was disrupted out, air quotes. They're over the topic of disruption. We've all just been through it. So let's not talk about it any further. But the problem was their people were so disconnected, and not just disconnected from each other physically, but disconnected from the work, disconnected from their why, to steal from Simon Sinek. And I'm very focused on why. And I started to dig into this, and I called on aspects of my training in philosophy and psychology, and even my own personal observations from what I did as a musician. Because when you think about your experience at a dueling piano bar, I needed to know who was in the audience. If I'm playing at a Howl at the Moon in Arizona, that is a different audience, right? Think about what's on the radio generally in Arizona. That is a different audience than if I'm in upstate New York or New York City or Florida. And those regional differentiators are important, but there's also individual differentiators in the audience. And you have to get good at grouping groups of people as a musician. And so I noticed that there were generally three types or three groups of people that would roll into a piano bar. One were the lifers. The people who, when they go to a new city, they're already Googling what's the piano bar in that city because they just can't wait to go see a new piano bar. And there's folks like that in all sorts of disciplines. There's folks like that with comedy clubs. There's folks who are like that, with casinos. I don't know whether that's a good thing or not. I'm not sure. But there's folks who have, a coffee shop. They want to find the best coffee shop in every city or whiskey bar, whatever it is, right? They're the lifers. I call them keepers because I'm going to keep them all night. They're going to be there all night. As long as we put on a great show, they're going to stay all night. But then we've got this second group, and they're often the most profitable group because they're bachelor parties, bachelorette parties, birthday parties, special events that roll in. Because it's a special event, they're willing to spend a bit more. They have a certain outcome that they want to get to celebrate somebody. But they're often just a stop on the destination. The piano bar is a stop on the journey for them. It's not where they're trying to stay the whole night. They're going to go somewhere else. It may be where their jump off point is for the night, or it may be sort of where they wrap up for the night. And I started to call them leapers because they're going to leap somewhere else eventually. That they're going to roll. And then you've got this third group, and I always chuckle when I think about this group because if we really do have freedom of choice, this third group kind of shouldn't exist. But they're the folks who have zero interest in being there. They were drugged there by their spouse or significant other. They were part of the group that was like vehemently against going to the piano bar, but they got overruled, 8-1. We're going to the piano bar. They were the one that said they didn't want to be there. And so they're just sitting kind of arms crossed, waiting for the liquid courage or the liquid fun to kick in after a couple of beers. And I even saw a few that would fall asleep. Like they'd sit in the back of our piano bar and they would just like close their eyes and sleep. And so I started calling them sleepers. So I got my keepers, I got my leapers, and I got my sleepers. Understanding how to engage those three groups in an audience is the key to a successful night. And what you saw was the way that the team on stage tackles those three groups. You don't have to do a whole lot for the keepers, but you can mess that up. There's nothing in particular I have to do to make the keepers stay, but there are things I can do that are going to push them out the door, right? The leapers are the interesting group. I can probably get them to stay a little bit longer, but really they want what they came for. If it's a bachelor, bachelorette party or birthday party, they want the groom or the bride to be, or the birthday boy or girl. They want them up on stage. They want us doing something to highlight them, right? The silly song, whatever it is. There's something they want. Mm-hmm. And if I give it to them, maybe they'll stay, but maybe they'll say, hey, we got what we came for. Let's go. And they'll give us fat tips on the way out. That third group, though, if you get too many sleepers in an audience, that can kill the vibe. It can kill the crowd. So you've got to become expert at figuring out, all right, are these people just folks I got to leave alone and just let them get out the door? Or what can I do to engage them? And that's where some of the silly piano bar antics come in. And I'm not going to go into what all of them are, but if you've been to a piano bar, you know that it's not just music and singing, it's skits. I mean, it's literally bits that we rehearse and practice with our partners so that we're creating not just a concert experience, but really an entertainment experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to go, well, what are those parallels in the work world? And what does that have to do with how we engage and how we perform? And what you see me talk about in the video is that businesses tend to focus on growth and focus on their people for the sake of growing the business. And it's very easy for us to sense that when employers throw around words like engagement. Well, what does engagement mean to you as an organization? Because in the common parlance, we think about engagement like to an individual, right? And that's a promise. And that's a two-way street. But generally, when businesses talk about engagement, it's because they want the business to grow. They want the business to profit. But what does the employee get? Job security? Well, I got news for you, pal. We got the internet and we got Venmo. Nobody needs job security. If you're really enterprising and you're really motivated, you can create your own job security by creating your own job. So we need something more if we're really going to keep the best people in our organizations, if we're going to attract the best people to our organizations, and if we're going to deliver the best product for our customer, for our end user. So we need to understand our audience better from a business standpoint. And at the same time, the people who work within the business aren't getting out of this conversation scot-free. I think about performers that I've played with up on stage who just show up, play the tunes, no emotion, not really getting into it. They may be talented, but are they delivering what the audience wants? Or are they just simply collecting the tips, collecting the paycheck, just doing the bare minimum? You know, there's a word in the business that you're probably familiar with, discretionary effort. That's what makes a show rock when you go see it, is the discretionary effort that you get from the performer. You can listen to if we put this in the context of an actual concert, you can listen to the CD, you can stream their music on Spotify or wherever you stream your music. I'm going to be agnostic since I don't know where this is going to show up in terms of podcasts, but wherever you stream your music, you can do that. You're there for the discretionary effort. You're there for the show. And when we put that in the parlance of work for our employees, it's not enough to show up, clock out, and collect your paycheck. You've got to add value. You've got to add impact for your organization. And when employees prioritize impact, the income always follows. So let's dial it back a bit, because I'm sort of going off in a lot of directions here. And let's talk about how the keepers, leapers, and sleepers relate to your audience, maybe to the business world. Your keepers are your rock stars. They're the people who love what they do, where they do it, who they do it with. It's not a job. It's not a paycheck for them. It's a calling. Yeah. But there's also this other subset of keepers that we tend to overlook. And there are rock solids. They're the folks who will show up at 8, who will clock out at 5, and who will crush it in between those hours, but they don't want to get promoted. They don't want to do anymore. They don't want that special project. They're not trying to get more visibility. They just love their job. They love what they do, and they want to be left alone to do it. And they'll do it well. That's what they want. Those are crucial for an organization to succeed. Those keepers are crucial. But we often make a mistake in dealing with our talent, and that's it. We try to get everybody else to be a keeper. Mm-hmm. And this is where, as a performer, I would get tripped up on stage, is to try and make everybody stay all night long. That's not what they want. They're here to get what they want. And if I give them what they want, I'll get what I want. So let's talk about those leapers. Let's apply that to business. Leapers may love what they do, but your organization is not their final destination. And it's time we allowed that honest conversation to take place in performance reviews and in the hiring process, because the lack of candor in that area is why we get poor performance. I was going to use a bad word. Why we get poor performance. So what do we do with our leapers then? Well, what if we help them leap? What if in giving them what they want, we could create an honest conversation, a transaction to get what we want as an organization? Often the leapers are high-performing individuals. But we are not their final destination. They're building their resume. They're creating career capital, let's call it.
I love it.
And as a leader, if we help them leap, when they get where they're going, there are tremendous benefits that accrue to us as an organization. And I want to be conscious of time, so I'm not going to get into all that. But let's talk about the sleepers, because the sleepers get called disengaged. They get called cancerous employees. They get called jerks. They get maligned, in my opinion.
Right.
Those sleepers aren't bad people. They're just dormant talent. They're what innovation experts call trapped value. And it's our job as leaders to take responsibility for that, because we brought them into the organization. Okay, maybe we weren't the hiring manager, but if we're their boss, we have a responsibility to them. We have a responsibility to lead them. It may be out the door. It may be to their next best opportunity, but we have to help them get there. Or we can lead them to realize the impact they can make in this organization, to realize that their purpose is actually more aligned with our purpose than they believe it to be. But we cannot point at them, say, you're disengaged, you're a problem, figure it out. Because the moment of disengagement is when my problem as a leader becomes your problem as my employee. That's the moment of disengagement. And the work that I do helps organizations capitalize on that moment. Just like at a piano bar, there are moments we create with the music, with the dynamics, right? The louds and the softs of the music, where we can either lose our audience, where they will become disengaged, where the keepers will leave and everybody else along with them, or where we can pull everybody in tighter. Those are the moments that I'm passionate about helping organizations create.
I love so much of what you just said, right? You talked about a two-way street. I challenge leaders to lead, right? People are very proud when they get promoted to leadership and they're like, I am a leader. I'm like, awesome. The first part of that word is lead, right? You have to take that seriously. It's an honor to be a leader. It's an honor to serve your people as a leader. It's so easy to get caught up with the keepers, right? Because they're fun, they're excited, they're aligned, and you're going to go off and do really cool stuff, and you get all hyper. That's easy. That's not leading, right? That leadership comes to me at the leapers and the sleepers, right? Like, how do you make a difference in somebody's life by partnering with them in their journey and understanding their needs, right? I used to do rounding to people that didn't report to me in a really large organization. And it was my favorite thing to do. I did it for an hour a week, which is a huge investment of an executive's time to wander around and just meet people. And they were just like blown away, right? But that investment in time created such an alignment, such an interest, such a, like, nobody else was doing it, right? People were like, who is that? Everybody wanted to be on my team. Everybody, like, because I cared about the people, right? Like, to me, that focus on people is so important. And to your point, right? If you develop somebody and then they have a better opportunity, that's not a bad thing. That's an amazing thing. You did an amazing job of investing and developing that person and helping them to the next step that maybe your organization can't provide them, right? Just because they're promotable doesn't mean you can promote them. Maybe you don't have a need for that level of position and they're going to go get it somewhere else. Be proud of that moment. That's an amazing moment as a leader.
And this is the differentiator. When we talk about engagement, when we talk about the type of leader you're describing, it's selfish to want to keep that person when that's not what they want. And when we talk about engagement, it's all, from a company perspective, it's all about me, I. We want you engaged. We want this. When we talk about employee retention, we want you. We want to keep you. Yeah, but what does the employee want? Leadership is not selfish. It's selfless. It takes a lot more time than being an individual contributor. And so this idea that all of a sudden you get the promotion, the title, and the keys to the executive washroom, and now we're golfing on Friday. In my leadership roles, I had less time than I did in my individual contributor roles. And I learned that the hard way. I learned that by really screwing the pooch on a couple leadership opportunities. I lost good people because I wasn't ready to lead when I was given the title. And that's what organizations are wrestling with, they're grappling with right now, is that because of this great reset, reshuffle, reorganization, reimagination, whatever you want to call it, we've lost a lot of the upper level leadership. They said the pandemic felt like a perfect time to take my retirement and sail off into the sunset. Great. I wish more leaders would do that. I think that would create opportunities for everybody to grow. But now we've got middle managers who are moving up into senior roles, entry-level managers who have been thrust into middle management, which is a different experience than that initial management role. And who gets the line level management roles, the sales manager roles, the operations manager roles, the manager roles that I would argue are really doing the most out of all of the leaders. Well, we give them to the top performers, but the top performers aren't top leaders. They're top individual contributors. So it's this skill set that we haven't developed in our people. And if you look at the data, globally, we spend $300 billion in the business world on skill development, on training and development. 2% of that is spent on non-job specific skill development. So we'll call that leadership training. That is generally not accessible until you're at a VP level in an organization. So let's say it takes about 8 years to get to a VP level, depending on what organization you're at. Some may be a little quicker, some may be a lot longer. That's 8 years of developing this person that we haven't done. And if you put whatever your industry is, you give me a nurse, give me a programmer, okay, give me a loan officer, give me the assistant general manager of a store. I'm hiring for that position, and I've got two people who on paper, their skill set, their background is nearly identical. But one of them is much higher on the EQ scale, emotional intelligence, what we generally call soft skills. I call them aspirational skills or tactical skills. Mm-hmm. The one with the higher EQ is always the better choice. And yet we don't do anything to develop those skills until our people get to a VP level. We're not just hurting our people, we're hurting our organization. And so this is the thing. When we make our people better, our people make our company better. The human capital is a real value that we can track. I have a friend who wrote a book called The New ROI, The Return on the Individual. It's a great book. And he's a corporate valuation expert. That's what he does. He helps companies value themselves before a sale. We can value talent. We can objectively track it, just like Dan Kahneman objectively tracked happiness. We know its value. And yet organizations and the executives that lead them are not investing enough. And they know it. In surveys, they say it. Surveys done by McKinsey and by Deloitte, they say we know this is an area of deficiency, and we know we're not investing in it.
Well, one of the benefits that I had early on, I was probably in my 20s. I got promoted to a leadership position with the Federal Reserve Bank. I'll give them credit. And as soon as I did that, right, and it was an entry-level position, it was a supervisor, they assigned me an executive coach. And I was like, I'm not an executive. And they're like, you lead people. And as a leader of people, we invest in you to support you and guide you and grow you because our people are the most important thing that we have. And it was the most amazing thing that I ever had. And at that point, I had a bachelor's in business administration with a concentration in management. I knew the science of management, right? But I learned more from that executive coach than I did in my bachelor's degree that was valuable in leading people. I got an MBA with a focus in management and leadership. And I still point back and I go, okay, that was great. That was building on my bachelor's knowledge. But I learned more from that executive coach about leading people and how to motivate and move a workforce. And then here at my office, I have the privilege, at first they were like, oh, this is terrible. You're, an executive and we filled your office with all these people that this is their first real job, right? I had guys that, I'm looking out at them right now. I had a guy who was started his own company building snowmobile sleds, like to haul snowmobiles around. And so this is his first real office job. I have 5 of them in my office, and they said, this is terrible. You have all these people that have no real business knowledge. They're just starting their careers, and then you're up here. And I'm like, it's the greatest gift you could have given me, right? Because I get to impact these guys every day and help them grow as people, as employees, as contributors. It's the most awesome thing. I come to work every day and I'm excited, yeah, sure, for what our company does. But I'm really excited that I get to impact 5 individuals that are just starting their careers right out of college. They're trying to figure it out, and I get to contribute to that every day. That's the magic of leadership. That's what I got so excited when I saw your topics. I was like, he gets it, right? He's all about, like, if we develop our people, the business will grow. I love what you said. Like, if you're a great contributor and you add value, the money will follow. So I got an opportunity to speak to a high school through junior achievement, and I was all about, like, stop trying to figure out the job. Do what you love and do it well. And titles and money and cars and boats and stack the cash and all this crazy shit, that will all come, right? But if you just, well, I guess I'm going to be an accountant. I don't really want to be an accountant. And you're a good accountant, great. To me, you're probably going to be, in that leaper category, right? You're going to do a good job. You'll solidly perform. You'll move. You'll go to a different firm, this, that, and the other. And all your life, you're going to have regrets, right? Because you didn't pursue your passion. I just love your story, man. I'm super jazzed to have an opportunity to talk to you. On your site, I just want to highlight this because you're a fun person, right? So I'm sure you get told that all the time, right? And if you can't hear
I
Gregory's
often get called a
passion,
mushroom.
yeah,
I'm a fun guy.
I love it. I love it.
See, listeners, we were talking about dad jokes before we started recording. We had some context.
so people post stuffy blog posts, right? Like, a lot of times you go to a website and they're like, oh, the 10 things that you need. And okay, that's valuable. Like, making mistakes like a little mermaid. I'm like, okay, that's just fun. I haven't read it, but it seems fun. If you have this key, you can lock any door, the 7 keys of successful performance. Like, the content you're laying down is just kind of motivating and inspiring, right? It's what the world needs to hear right now, because people, we haven't learned anything through this damn pandemic. Hopefully we've learned that people are important.
People are everything. When you look at any problem we have, it all relates to people. Everything comes back to people. But that also means that any opportunity we want relates to people. So there's these two sides of the coin. One thing that I chose to become really good at, and I'm still working on the really good part, but I'm practicing every day, is looking at the other side of any statement. So what's that? The third law, Newton's third law, that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So for any upset that I feel, that means somewhere there's upside. It's my job to see that upside. And that creates opportunity for me. And when we help our people realize that, for an example, let's say that you have an office job and it's 5 p.m. and you're about to clock out, you're about to shut everything down for the day, and all of a sudden your boss drops you an email or stops by your desk and assigns you a project, an urgent project that needs to be done by Monday at lunch. And you look at this thing and there is no way that if you start Monday at 8 a.m., this is going to get done by Monday at lunch, which means your weekend just got smaller.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to see the negative in that. I don't have to paint that picture for your listeners. But when we start looking at the upside of that, I call this the Nancy Kerrigan factor, right? Do you remember when Nancy Kerrigan got hurt at the Olympics?
I do.
She famously uttered that line, why me? Why anybody? That's a natural reaction for any of us to have. It would be unnatural for her not to feel that way, given all that she'd put into preparing for the Olympics and then that absolute nonsense debacle that happened to her. But she started to use that experience in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, we get that email, we get the assignment, we have our why me moment, we have our Nancy Kerrigan moment, but then we look for the upside. What if you're the only person the boss trusts to get this done? What if the people who are going to see this, are going to know that you're the one getting it done, so it's going to give you visibility? There are a lot of what ifs that we don't know. And I got a great set of questions from Cy Wakeman, who is another amazing speaker out there. I mean, she's just a powerhouse. 3 questions that you can use in that scenario. One is, what do I know for sure? Take all of the BS, all of the hypothesizing out of this. What do I know for sure about the situation I'm in? Second question, what can I do to help? What can I do that might make this situation better? What can I do that might move this situation along? And then the last question, and this is my favorite, what would great look like? And if we start to ask those questions in any situation, especially when we deal with people, because people bring a lot of uncertainty. Cy calls it drama. When we start to ask those questions, we can achieve better outcomes. Better outcomes generally means better profit. It's okay to, profit's important, but so are people. My challenge to leaders is to decide who they're going to put first.
I love it. You know, so many companies bring, you know, they have their, almost every company, right, has an annual retreat or whatever, right? And the great ones that I've seen have a speaker or a keynote that isn't from their company. The ones that struggle, right, are like, oh, we're going to parade all our VPs, and this one's going to talk about performance, and this one's going to talk about the state of the business, and this one's going to talk about holy yawn, right? Like your people will sit there because you paid them to sit there, and there's lunch, and maybe there's cake after or whatever, right? They're going to hang out with you, but that doesn't inspire them, right? To have a third-party public speaker, we do it every year, and we always have somebody who doesn't work at our company come in and talk about something, right? But something inspiring, something that's on point to our mission. I mean, your conversation is about them, right? Your public speaking and motivation, especially to leadership, is about how to be a better leader for the people that you pay, right? I mean, it's so cool. And again, I keep going back to, you know, I've had guests on that are great guests. Maybe they have a book or whatever, and they usually have an okay website. Like I challenge folks to really go to Gregory's website and play around there, right? Cruise around, watch his video, his public speaking, and he talks about a performance agreement, which we kind of didn't really get a chance to get into. There's all kinds of really cool things that you do. You know, I just keep highlighting the website as a way to get a hold of you, because very few podcast guests that I get do I actually come out more inspired, right, than I did over a podcast episode, right? The stuff you're talking about is my jam, man. It's like what feeds me as a leader, and it makes me want to go out and be a better leader, right? So if we did this in a 45-minute podcast, like think about having Gregory come to your event up on stage or even in a small leadership retreat, right? And inspire your leaders to be better, which inspires your people to be more engaged and better. And the whole company just raises up. Like if you think about what that can do, that's higher productivity, that's more engagement, that's more everything, right? I mean, that just leads to nirvana, which is a better company with higher retention, lower costs, and greater profits.
I love it. I can't help but wish that I had a soundboard here, because when you said that just leads to nirvana, I would just start playing a Nirvana song. I mean, that was just perfect, you know?
I figured you were sitting at a piano. I'm like, he's going to start striking some keys pretty quickly here.
Well, you know, it's funny because the performance agreement is longer than we have time to get into now.
Absolutely.
But it is the focus of the keynote. And it's the first step to an organization creating a tip jar culture. Right? I mean, that's what fuels a performance at a dueling piano bar is that tip jar. You're going to show up, and of course, there's going to be music, because that's what you'd expect at a piano bar. But what do you get when you put something in that tip jar? And I know at a piano bar, you know, we're thinking money. So if you're listening to this and going, oh, so Greg just wants me to pay my people more money. That's not how a tip jar culture works in the business world. There are things more valuable than money that we can give our people. Of course, you need to pay your people a reasonable wage. I'm not saying money isn't important, but when it comes to creating a tip jar culture, it's not just about putting money in that tip jar. And when we establish a performance agreement, that's where the organization starts. They can now build that tip jar culture. And ultimately create a place that people want to come back to, want to perform at again and again and again. I call those people encore performers. That's my vision, is to help organizations create a place full of encore performers through a tip jar culture. And it all begins with this performance agreement.
Awesome. Well, Gregory, man, I'm fired up. Legitimately, I'm not just saying that because we're on a podcast, man. Sometimes I do get guests that I'm like, this dude's awesome. And so I appreciate your story, your overcoming adversity. I'm really glad you're here and doing what you're doing and inspiring companies to be better and inspiring leaders to lead, right? I challenge leaders all the time. Leaders are lead. We didn't touch on, you said top performers often become leaders, but they aren't always the top leaders, right? Please invest in your people. Find some way, right? Whether it's through motivating them or putting them through a training program or investing in them some way. Don't just promote people to leaders of people and assume that somehow they're going to be good at that. There is no manual, there is no training, there is no tool guide. Do something to invest in that person who you just raised up. They will thank you and appreciate you and remember that forever. And even if that investment is just your time as a senior leader to spend with them, to teach them the tricks and the trades that worked for you. Gregory, this has been awesome, man. I appreciate, again, seriously, you taking the time joining us here on the podcast. I'm highly interested in your virtual piano bar. So, those of you at RPI listening, don't think I'm gonna let this slip off the radar. And we might be doing some Friday virtual piano bar with Greg soon. So this is very cool. Thanks, man. I really enjoy your stuff and what you're doing out there in the world.
I have equally had a blast. I really enjoyed this. So thanks for having me on, Michael.
Absolutely.